Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. There you can find out how to join our merry little crew and how to join Discord and how to ask questions and also how to join the panel if you're interested. All you got to do is be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and put up your Zoom hand, and you can be joining the panel if you'd like to. All right, let's jump into the questions. Let's go to the first question. Go ahead, Mitchell.
John Fuett from Huntersville, North Carolina. After yesterday's Apple announcement, is there anything left for October?
Go ahead, David.
M1X.
M1X might very possibly. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I actually am looking forward to hearing that in the MacBooks, but I also wondered, going backwards a bit, whether this was more of an iPhone 12s announcement than a 13, and whether the exciting stuff for the phone's probably for next year.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think so. I think I will say I get very burnt out on the whole rumor mill. What's coming up next? I've learned as I gotten older to just kind of like go, oh, new stuff. Look at that. Look at that. It's a new phone. How cool, and just kind of just roll with it. I used to live and breathe and die by the rumor sites, and I literally never look at them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, a lot of times it's just trying to read the tea leaves of what might be new opportunities and what we might be able to take advantage of. But, like whether I get a new AirPod is less important to me, but like whether we think AR, for instance, is going to really roll out in scale, when that's going to happen, I'm usually very interested in. Or, I thought we'd see more around things like object capture or other things like, some of the bits and pieces there that now I don't know in their normal release schedule. I don't know when we would see something new. Probably not until spring. Like where they would do an announcement and really show something. The next things that we have that could be interesting, of course, are in October. You might see new machines. Also, end of October is typically a Final Cut motion compressor kind of thing. Do we know if that's been scheduled yet, Chris?
The summit has been scheduled. Yeah.
Do we know what the dates are for that?
I could look it up. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
but yeah, definitely happening. Definitely virtual.
Right.
I think there's a live component. I can't keep up with it. I've just been too busy.
But usually that's when we see an update for for Final Cut and motion and compressor.
They have done a few updates during that era.
If we're going to see one. Usually if we don't see one there, we don't expect big things until the next year.
How often do you think Apple releases a thing as a test balloon to gauge people's interest, and if it doesn't take off, then they pull back on development? Like, say for example, you mentioned object capture.
I think Apple thinks really hard about what they do. I think there's a cauldron there that destroys lots of products that we would probably make billions of dollars, but they decide that they don't think that it's worth.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. I talked to one company that not Apple, and we were talking about cameras, like 360 cameras, and that company said, "Well, we can't turn the pipe on unless we know we can sell 2,000 units a year." And these are big, like at $50,000 a piece or whatever. I got to sell 2,000 of them, or it's not worth doing. And so in the same way, Apple probably has a number that's much higher than that that they need to sell before it's worth the energy that it will take to support it over long periods of time. I think that the difference between Apple and Google, for instance, is Google starts lots of things and just doesn't finish a lot of them. Apple doesn't start very much, and then they just crank. And so object capture, I think again, I think that we're going to look back 2 or 3 years from now and see one of the most masterful rollouts in the history of computers. Like the AR stuff that they're bringing out is just like the drips for years. Like this is not like it's not. I've just never seen a company do this before, where they just are dripping information, where they're telling analysts 3 years ago or 4 years ago that they're really excited about AR, and then they're slowly giving us USDZ, and they're slowly giving us object capture, and they're allowing the first adopters to get ahead. Like build something and build business and get things going while things are still calm. And but when you see the possibilities of it's really hard right now, and they're kind of working out all those kinks, because that's what was missing for what Google did, is they started getting into the AR thing, but they didn't build all the tools that made it easy to do it. like to make it work. Like when they put out the just the LiDAR, there's all these companies. Now I use Polycam all the time. Like just like, and it took a long time for it to kind of sort it out. But now it's like, oh, I need to do something. I was working on something with I think I showed it earlier. I'm planning something new with my stairs on my house. I just went out with my iPhone and scanned it, like just like, and now I have did a couple measurements and sent it away, and that's the kind of thing that, that stuff has become normal. That being normal, the content creation part being finished before you put out the demand, that is something only a really large company does. A really big company that can afford to basically seed the entire market with all the tools that are required to make the content. That's the big advantage of owning Final Cut and Motion and everything else, is the ability to embed USDZ, embed all the the 360 workflows, embed all those things slowly over time, making them really efficient, so that when there's this huge demand for the work, which there will be, there's lots of tools to do it, and you don't have to wait for Adobe, and you don't have to wait for Autodesk, and you don't have to wait for anybody else to produce the content, to give you what you need, to do it. And you figured out a lot of the things in the back end, and it's just it requires an incredible amount of scale and work to do what they're doing. I'm watching it from the outside, just going, it'll be a stunning failure if it doesn't work. It'll be stunning, but I don't think that's going to happen. Like when you see some of the tests that we've been doing for the last 5 years in AR, you're just like, oh, if people can if it's not too hard to make and it's not too hard to download, if Apple does the Apple thing, which makes it just work, it's everywhere. Imagine going to a historical site and being able to pick up your phone and see, like walking into Gettysburg and just pick up your phone and see what it looked like on the day of the event. And have little highlights appearing, and you pick up the phone anywhere on the battlefield and it shows, okay, Montgomery was over here and whatever that, and he was up here on Little Round Top, and this is Devil's Den, and this is the angle, and this is where the sharpshooters were, and this is where and all those things are all things that make it adds value to the location. But then it's also being able to look at objects and look at, products, seeing them in your house, all those things. But what's hard right now is making the content. If Apple released it right now, there'd be a whole lot of demand, and then nothing would happen. And then people go, this is stupid. This isn't going to work. And that's what kills a lot of things, is either you don't have the tools or the people to do it, or you do bad versions of it. 3D, when we saw Avatar, we all thought that 3D was the future. And then we saw everything else. I would have happily paid more for more avatars. I was not going to pay for 2D cards put into 3D space. That was what was wrong. Next question.
Just James from Dublin, Ireland. Now that Zoomtopia is over, how do the panel rate the new Zoom events experience, and how could they improve it?
Go ahead. And just as a note, tomorrow, that's all we're going to talk about. So, but we'll talk about it a little bit here. Go ahead, David.
Oh, Zoomtopia. I wish I had Alex's willpower to not watch it. You have to separate the experience of watching it from the events platform. I would say that the platform itself was nice. There were little pieces that I wish they would change on the preview. I wish that you have that on the side panel. You've got all the different sessions going on, and then if you click on one, it'll pop into the main view. I wish there were titles on those sessions, because you can't tell what session you're jumping into. The platform I thought was nice. The experience itself was really pretty crummy, and I was really disappointed that they weren't. Everything they announced was Q4 or Q1 of 2023. There was nothing really for today, it felt like.
Good, John.
We looked at events when it first came out, and it's a kludge of meetings and webinars, and it's really goofy on the back end, getting in and out of the simultaneous events. And Zoomtopia itself was a cluster. It was way too many topics, too much time. You're not separate. As Alex always says, you're no longer constrained by time or space. So they need to rethink that whole thing. I just got a news alert: NAB is canceled.
Wow. we're going to stop that for just a second. We're just going to stop the presses. Everyone, like, we're going to pick up all the print here. We're going to stop here for a second. Whoa. So that just happened. That just got announced.
Our local newspaper just announced it.
Wow. It's up on their website also. I've got it here.
Yeah. I think that it became untenable. Like it was, and I think that it was going to be a difficult. Everyone was quietly talking about the fact that, I was talking to a lot of vendors, and they were all like, "Yeah, we're not." They didn't know if they wanted to take their money out because they want to make sure they don't lose their booth space. So the one of the things about booth space is that if you don't go 1 year, you skip 1 year. This is the mafia of NAB or all the conventions. Is you get the position of your booth space has to do with the size of your booth space and the continuity of it. So if you make the booth space smaller 1 year, you'll get pushed back. If you don't come a year, you're in the back of the South Hall. And so the thing is that keeps everybody. That's the thing that keeps everybody churning. Everybody in the front of that pays for it, and they pay for that immediately. Like they'll sign up for years if they have to make sure that they stay in the very front of NAB. And so the result is that no one wanted to lose that space, but I think that the millions of dollars that were tied up in, what it takes. So when you think about one of these big booths, it's not like $10 to do this. It's like somewhere between 2 to 7 million for most. Each one of the large booths, the Avid style, Sony style. It's they're big activations, So anyway, so what we want to do on our end is to think about, given that we don't have anything to cover. Oh, I guess Jeffrey, Jeffrey threw this in here. I guess given that we don't have anything to cover there anymore, who do we want to see? So like, who do we want to see here? So
I had a chat last night with. Do you know who Nick Rashby is?
I do know Nick. I've known Nick since before he is where he's now. He used to work.
Me too.
He used to be at ASG. So,
yeah, I bought my Media 100
Nick's
from Nick.
He's such a great guy.
He's a great dude. Anyway, I had a nice chat with him last night, and I said, what are your NAB show plans? He goes, "Oh, it's a blank show." I said, "Yes, it is a blank show. But what are you going to do?" And he goes, "Well, we're going to do a Zoom press conference." And I said, "I know how to solve the problem." He goes, "Oh." And so anyway, I'm going to chat with him later. And one, I think he'd be a fun guest. He's a great guy. Yeah. Two, I think I'm going to push him super hard to build the post-COVID trade show booth that he runs for a month or two or something. I'm going to push him real hard because I think, you mix a little bit between what Grant's doing and what we do every day.
Right. And
build a little studio up there in Grass Valley. Done. He could kill it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I've been talking to a lot of folks about NAB and around it. So I think what you're talking about is a great idea. Go ahead, Nigel.
A couple of observations. One, I was in Vegas this weekend, and I can tell you that the NAB may not be going, but definitely the tourists are, because the place was crazy busy. But most of those big events have drop-dead walk-away dates, somewhere between 30 and 60 days before they go. And so it's very strange to be around it because they're all going home until the day before, and then they make a decision to pull the plug because their insurance and their coverage will be activated that way. I do think, though, that as Chris was just saying, this is an interesting opportunity to ask instead of what do you want to show, what do your customers want to hear, and flow through that.
Yeah, and I think that again, we want to look at over the next couple of weeks, who we want to bring in. So let's use the second hour list in Discord to kind of post things. These are the companies that I would love to see what their new releases are. This is the stuff that we would love to, have guests on for. We have some starting next week that are related to new releases, and so, but let's brainstorm and think about those and fill up our second hours with stuff to start with. I think there's a lot of other opportunities, as Chris said. So we'll keep moving forward with that. Jeffrey.
So yeah, this looks to be the official announcement right here.
Yeah.
So we know that is true. But what's really concerning me is Infocom. Infocom's in Florida, so there's a little bit of a difference in that. If that's going to get canceled, what the status of CES is going to be in January, and if we should even think about just going through this rigmarole of registering and crossing our fingers and go from that. As for NAB, it looks like that they're planning for their regular April time slot for next year.
Which is probably what they should have done from the first place. Like it's just everyone's, and even then, I mean, there were a lot of discussions in February of 2020 that the real projections were 2024 from experts. Just in case we're all clear, like politicians are telling us one thing, but the real projections from the real experts was 2024 in 2020. Like not now, not some other time, but they expected it to be tumultuous until then. So all of these things are going to still be in flux for a little while longer. Next question.
James again from Dublin, Ireland. I like the feature in Mukana Notes allowing questions to be created and then posted at a later date. Having the option of adding tags for upcoming topics and posting them automatically on that day would be a great addition. Is that possible?
It's not possible yet. We're definitely thinking about it. So the goal, there's two things that have to happen there. One is what I want to do is push the schedule out and start having the schedule pushed further out so you can see what's coming in a month, that's coming out, building that out, and I'm working on that. And then from there, once we have that schedule pushed out, the idea is you could ask questions into any, definitely to your point, tag anything coming up in the future so that it automatically puts it in. And what we want is more than that, is to let you go ahead and post it towards that event, so that even, we can see what those questions are, or the person coming in the second hour could see, hey, I've got these questions, and they have more time to think about them. It'll make actually a better show in that process. And so I think that you're absolutely right that that's something that's necessary. It's a step towards transcending time and space, because it transcends time. It means that you can think about things in a longer period of time. Let's jump to the next question.
Jeffrey Powers from Madison, Wisconsin. What does Apple need to do to make the iPhone really compete with an on-set camera, assuming interchangeable lenses, for one?
Well, I don't think there have been people who've tried to build phones Sony built one that attached to the phone. There was a couple of, who was the I don't know why I can't think of it right now. DxO made a great camera for a phone, which I still have. I really like it. It looked like a little spy cam that hooked into your iPhone. But I think that it was really hard to get enough critical mass to make that work. So I don't think that and I don't know if they need to necessarily have a job. I don't think they need to replace the set. I think that what they're trying to do, with a lot of things like Kodak, gave people lots of film because it's the aspiration of all the independent filmmakers and all the home movie makers and everything else that sell. That's what pays for everything. The small amount that on set people buy is still a tiny amount. I will say that the phone is especially the next generation of the phone, you could do a lot with it. Like I find myself more and more leaning on my phone. Oh, I'll just shoot that piece on my phone. I literally shoot training on my phone all the time, because me dealing with a big camera and lenses and everything else. When we do trainings on how to build our kits, I do those all with my phone, because I can get it right where I want it. I just hold it there and I take the video, and then I take this video, and then I take this video, and I do it handheld with my phone, and it looks locked off, and I can move it around to just what I want and everything else. And it's just way easier if I'm not trying to impress anyone with short depth of field or anything else. Next question. Go ahead.
I was waiting for Chris to ask his question.
Chris Fenwick isn't here. That's why I just filled it in. Yep.
Douglas Carmichael. Sony offers 10 gigabyte internet service in Japan, but I've heard that the actual speed can be much less. Considering the bottleneck can be within the internet itself, is there an advantage to internet speeds higher than a gigabit to the end user?
Yeah, I wouldn't say now that there is, but there's what we don't want to do is I think that the problem we have right now with bandwidth is that we keep on saying, well, we need to have broadband, and broadband means something horribly low, like 25 down and 10 up or something like that is how they define that. So I think that what we need to do is put connections in that are capable of whatever speed we put through it. So that's why I think glass to the house is what should be on every campaign that wants to win. That we should talk about, but we should be talking not about broadband, not about, I don't know, whatever else people want to talk about, but glass to the house, like fiber all the way into the house for every American, or at least for every person around the world. But the point is that they, because then you can go to 10 bit, you can go to, or 10 megabit, gigabit, 40 gigabit, all those things can be done down the road. You can't think about what to do with it now, but we will be able to fill it up. So if you think about an 8K 120 feed, that's 300 to 500 megs. Just for that feed, if we wanted to send that to you. Next question.
Danny Law from Malaysia. If need to choose only one to purchase between an iPhone 13, a Pro Max 1 terabyte, or a Blackmagic Design Pocket Camera 4K, which would you choose? The 6K is just slightly more than the 13 Pro Max.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think this is a case of it depends. And I think, Alex, you sort of answered this question a couple of minutes ago. If you need the lenses, then you're going to need a Blackmagic 6K. If you don't need the lenses, then you're probably, depending what you're doing with it, fine with an iPhone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it just depends on the kind of what you're kind of shooting, so it would be hard to say which one is better than the other. But I would say that the phone can probably do an awful lot of the content creation that you need. But you're still it still will look better, and you will have more control, and you'll shoot footage that is much higher quality. The ProRes is great on the phone, but it doesn't compare to Blackmagic RAW. so you're at, so it's two different bits and pieces. Next question.
Bo Cordell from Charleston, South Carolina asked, has Alex given an update on his HDMI Matrix?
It works great. So I do have an update. I think that was it Danny actually that showed me up and went ahead and bought one and told me it works fine for me. And I was like, oh, now I just have to prove. I just have to it's just been sitting here, and I finally enter. By the way, enter was the button that I was missing. I was like trying to route it just by hitting the input output, and I thought that it would route it, but I have to push enter. As soon as I did that, it worked great, and it does EED, it passes through, so it will, it'll pass the information needed from the monitor through it to the device. So it is actually, it works really well. So I'm pretty happy with it. I have it set up to, I think I showed it earlier, but it routes out to a 4-up as well as back to the switcher, so there's a bunch of routes there that really extends what I can do. So it makes it a lot easier for me. The big thing I found is that I wanted to run things into my switcher, but I also wanted to run monitors full screen of that thing, of a mini, and so I have that all working now, and it works. It works really well. So it's, thumbs up, and especially at $499, not the $750 that I paid. Not that I'm bitter. Next question.
Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia. I found myself on a small event today where the only data option available was a 4040 satellite broadband connection. There was no LTE available for failover, and with pings of 35 microseconds, was I right to be nervous? It went well, by the way.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, if it's all you can get, literally, then you're certainly right to want to manage that risk appropriately. I mean, if it's all you can get, you have to kind of go with it. Satellite can be stable if it's managed properly. That can depend on lots of things, though, whether your dish is well aligned and locked off, what the weather conditions are, if you're on K or KU, bands, something like that. Really what provider you're using. If you've got a robust pipeline there, it can be reliable. The only way to get redundancy beyond that would be to have a separate stack, separate dish, separate uplink to a separate provider at best, maybe on a separate transponder even, but if it's done right, it can be reliable.
Yeah, I mean, we would typically use satellite over top of any kind of cellular connection. So there's there's 3 different satellites. So when we say satellite, the question is, what kind of satellite connection? So there's KA, KU, and C are the 3 most common. KA tends to be a pure, data connection, and you would typically not get 40 by 40 on a KA. So we would be surprised. KU, you absolutely could. You could get a lot. You can get up to, I mean, the most we've ever taken off of a KU truck is about 100 megs up and down. But the fact that you were talking about, pings of 35 is very, very low. So it seems odd that I don't know how you would get a ping that low on a satellite, depending on where you're pinging. So just, if you're pinging the truck, then maybe you get 35. But if you're pinging the other end of the satellite, I would expect hundreds of milliseconds of ping time. For two-way communication, you're going to see some delay. For a stream, it works just fine. For a stream, as long as it just keeps going the same direction, it doesn't need a lot on the way back. You shouldn't have any problem doing a stream, and I would feel fine with it. The only thing we think about is cloud cover, and not really cloud cover, but really deep cloud cover and rain. We have KU is susceptible. KA, you get too much fog and you have a problem. KU, a heavy rain will affect its ability to uplink, and so you'll see breakup. And then C-band, it's a lower wavelength, and it goes through just about everything. So when you see like a location, if you go to like ESPN, they have these giant C-bands, and you could have a hurricane go through. As long as it doesn't pick up the dishes, it would probably keep on broadcasting. So, but at KA, you lose it with a good heavy rain. Next question.
Timo Gallagher from Austin, Texas. Do you think that the audio quality of the conversations in after hours is good enough?
Go ahead, David.
Not only do I think it's good enough, I actually think it's important that we not begin to regulate that. I can imagine, after hours maybe getting shorter in time to accommodate for other shows that are happening throughout the day. But what's beautiful about after hours is that there are no expectations. Anybody can come in, anybody can ask a question, anybody can offer advice. And there's something really beautiful about not setting the standards too high.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, and last night I experienced that as well, where the gentleman came in and his mic was not of the best. We kind of lifted him up to a close enough kind of thing. So qualitatively, so long as you can be heard, or the rest of the panelists or participants are like, hey, you're muted, or hey, we can't hear you. It's a very supportive group. So I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I look at it kind of a yin and yang, the yang being office hours, where we're going to keep on trying to make it more and more like a broadcast. You can see the quality of the cameras, the quality of the mics. We're going to keep on tuning that up. We're going to keep on tightening the show to where by the end of the year, it will feel like a broadcast show, except that it's all of us, that are anybody who can be in there, and it's going to be a different kind of show than anyone's ever seen. On the same side of that, I want after hours to be, kind of just we're all figuring it out. There's got to be a place for us to experiment. There's got to be a place for it to be informal. There's got to be a place for us to do all those things, and for me to know that if I'm listening and I hear something, I'm out cleaning my pool, which I do probably more than I should, that I can just hit a button and start talking and talk into it and be part of that conversation. So I'm probably one of the more particular people. I don't even like listening to NPR with phoners. I think that I have more of an understanding for after hours. I don't want to turn people away in after hours or have them feel like, I can't, this isn't the right time for me to share because I don't have the right tools. I think that'd be very challenging. Next question.
Bo Cardle from Charleston, South Carolina. Finally starting to tinker with here to record gear. Once I have a layout built, is there a good way to print it out?
David?
I know that there's an export function so you can get the JSON, but for a graphic representation, the only thing I could think of would be to use screenshotting kind of things and page through.
It's an interesting, and definitely ask the question on Discord as well, because when John Barker's here, he might be able to do it. John oftentimes is in our after hours as well. But I'd reach out to him. It seems like it should do that. Like that would be useful.
If not, it's a good feature request.
Yeah, it's a great feature request, and he's pretty responsive. So I would definitely take a look at that. Next question.
Johnny Estilis, sorry if I mispronounced that, of Manila. I've been using a QLab for video playout lately. What would be the advantage of using a Hyperdeck instead?
The main thing is that the Hyperdeck, number one is I don't know if you can activate a QLab from the switcher. So I don't think that you can. I mean, you can, but there's a lot of work to it. You can do an OSC, or you can ping it, or there's some complex ways of kind of putting that together. But I don't think there's any way to just get QLab to see the switcher. The advantage that you have with a Hyperdeck is that the the switcher can see the Hyperdecks over the network. And so the switcher can just hit play, and it'll just, when you can select what track you want, you can set an endpoint and then hit play, and it'll just play it out from the Hyperdeck. And you can also set it so that when you cut to it, so you can queue up a title inside of a Hyperdeck, or play up B, or other software coming. And when you cut to that place, it just automatically starts playing. So those are some advantages that might make it a little bit tighter. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think Jason Bache alluded to it as well the other day, where because it's an appliance, there's something intrinsically kind of safe about that being an appliance rather than a computer.
Yeah. I mean, they're all computers, but this is a much lower level computer that it forces you to do things. It forces you to be more structured. So, for instance, with a Hyperdeck, we have to record everything. We have to output everything exactly the same way, same number of tracks. Apple. Typically for me, it's Apple ProRes 422, same number of tracks, maybe 444 if we're going to do key fill. But you have to conform all your video footage, and you have to work through it all, and that process tends to make it more stable. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the folks at Blackmagic say ProRes 444 is their preferred flavor.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big file. Like 444 is great if you need key fill. 444 is great, but you don't need it for. I mean, we use 422 and 422 LT oftentimes, for play out. If there's a lot of it that we have to play out, and it doesn't, for playing out to a stream, you can't. Once it hits H.264, you really can't see the difference between LT and 422, because it's already being compressed way down further than that. Next question.
Peter Rosado from Las Vegas, Nevada asked, Apple Keynote, a nice production value. However, quoting Alex, I did not really feel my wallet on fire. What set the panelist wallets on fire?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I also didn't feel my wallet on fire. I was intrigued by the iPad mini. That was probably the one thing that I walked away interested in.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed yesterday. I was hoping for a little bit more, but incremental, and I'm in the trade-in program. So for me, it's a no-brainer. For $400, I get a new phone every year.
I think the ProRes, I think that's only available on the new Pros. I think they need the CPU power to do that. So I'm pretty interested in the ProRes. I can't get enough lenses. I just can't get. So 3x to me, another, being able to push out further on that lens is pretty important for me. So I think that's something I'm pretty interested in. But yeah, I think that other than crazy people like us that need the newest thing for the next year, especially if you're on a show that talks about it, so I need to get it no matter what. I kind of it's in my future no matter what, because I talk about it all on a show. But I think that if I had the 12, I'd probably, if I wasn't needed for what, I'd just keep the 12. And if I wasn't doing production, I don't think that there's a lot of good reason. But I think that the other thing we have to remember is that a lot of times it's not about you're not selling to the person who bought. Apple's ecosystem is so large, they're not selling the new phone to the person that had the last phone. They're selling the new phone to someone who was 3 or 4 generations behind, because there's tens of millions of people that are 2, 3, 4 generations behind, hundreds of millions of people. So you're really looking at these are the new things. Is this the time for you to go ahead and finally go up from your iPhone 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, to the new thing? And so I think that's part of the process there. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. When Alex is talking about Office Hours 2.0, he is also talking about needed hardware. Would you please give us a hint why you would use extra hardware for that?
I'm a hardware guy. So I will say that I like things to be modular. I like them to be something I can see. I like them to be, if something fails, I can remove it and replace it. And I'm also attempting to do bit rates and audio that is not capable, that the cloud isn't capable of supporting yet. So I'm trying to build a immersive HDR show down the road. And so I can't do that in the cloud right now. The tools that are in the cloud can't support the bit rates and channel systems that I'm looking for. So that's why I am in hardware. The hardware that we use is, we have some Mac Minis that are grabbing everybody. Each Mac Mini goes through a Blackmagic card that is, that's in a Sonnet box, and that sends 4 people out each into a Blackmagic 40x40 hub, which then passes that all into a Constellation. The Constellation is being mostly driven from MixEffect Pro from an iPad, and then the Constellation goes out to part of it goes out to a 16 by multi-view, so that's what our grid panel is going to look like. But then it also goes out to the encode, and that encoder is a Blackmagic UHD link. So the goal is to get this to a 4K, 10-bit immersive audio program. We're going to see little bits of it starting up over this month, and then we'll be kind of in full tilt in October, and then by November we should have it all running in those formats. And again, that will eventually be able to do it all in the cloud, but right now it's easier to do it with hardware. so that's why we're and it would take a lot of instances, and it would actually, I don't know if it would pencil out in the end if we try to do it in the cloud at the moment. Next question.
Craig Cadoke from Toronto, Canada. Is the lack of LiDAR in the non-pro cameras a big surprise?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, not really. There's a lot of people that just don't really care about having LiDAR in their phone. They don't have any need for it. Some of these phones that they'll get are mostly probably going to be a business phone, so they're handed a phone to be turned into their corporate offices. So they won't want to have all those extra camera features on, especially when it comes to privacy and things like that. They just won't want to have to deal with all that extra stuff, and probably won't even take a picture from that phone.
Yeah, it's one of those things that that it's so much better with the LiDAR, but you have to figure out where. That LiDAR component probably adds $50 to $75 to the phone cost. so and when you think of all the different costs that it requires, and so those are the kind of things they have to make decisions around. But I will say with the LiDAR, the snappiness and always knowing the scale and always having those other things definitely changes the experience. Next question.
Stefan Fischer of Würzburg, Germany is back with the camera settings app of Logitech is crashing several times a day on my Mac with Big Sur 11.2.3 as the panel ideas or similar experiences. Thanks.
Go ahead, John.
So I downloaded Manual Cam, and that's what I use to control my Brio, and it works better than any other application that I have found.
Yeah, manual camera and webcam settings are the two that I've bounced back and forth with, and I usually have both of them because they somehow one interacts with the camera better than the other. I don't know why, but yeah, I wouldn't use the Logitech software. The Logitech hardware, amazing. Logitech software, not so much. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when watching MITK, don't know what the acronym is.
That's Mad in the Kitchen.
Thank you. There was a signal strength display on the lower left of the screen. Does that come from the Zoom rooms used for each participant, and could ZoomISO remove that display?
The answer is it is for each participant. It doesn't have any real meaning. It almost never means what it says it means. And yes, ZoomISO gets rid of it. Next question.
Stuart F. from Melbourne, Australia. The Freefly Wave high-speed camera. Anyone had any experience with it? Looks to be using the same CMOS CMV 12,000 sensor found in Blackmagic Design and Asia cameras, but at much higher frame rates.
Go ahead, David.
I'm sorry. I meant to tag for the previous question. I apologize for that.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't think a lot of us have used it. A lot of times the chips are capable of a lot faster the sensors are capable of a faster frame record. What's missing is the memory to basically cache it. So how much cache they put into it is really what makes the difference on a lot of those sensors. The sensors can be refreshed a lot faster than what's being usually used. It's just what do you do with the frames as you generate them? Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, in many countries, mobile networks still have data limits and coverage charges. And he references a URL. Wouldn't that be a barrier to fully using mobile devices in production workflows?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, absolutely, it can. The biggest problem, though, is that they don't have a lot of the infrastructure in a lot of areas. I remember talking. I had a friend that dealt with data over in I think it was South Africa, and he told me a story about how he had one person actually had to walk like 4 hours to get to a church where there was internet access, so he could download one song on his phone, bring it back, and that was a song that he listened to for a week or something like that until he could go back and get another song. I've also heard of stories where satellites have when satellites start to crest over, you get a certain window to actually do your business, because then at about 8 a.m. the companies start taking over that internet, and then the pipeline is just completely dead for you. So it's a lot about infrastructure, which is things like where one laptop per child started to really want to shine in getting internet out to the masses.
Yeah, one of the things he points out, MTN in Rwanda, and I have a lot of experience. I've spent a lot of time in Rwanda, and so one of the interesting things is that you're right that they have to figure out how to. The problem for the providers is they have to figure out how to provide the connectivity to the users at a very low cost. But they do need to constrain how much they use the data, because they have they'll overload the cell towers. So they do need to, so what they're trying to do is give you it's almost free to use it. And then just if you're using it, I'm going to make you pay for it. And so in their sense of a constrained resource, which is the cell towers. Now, Rwanda's probably further ahead than most in the sense that they have their own problems with this, is that they actually forced everyone to be at a certain cost that was very low. So when Rwanda rolled out LTE, the government actually paid for all the fiber backbones, and they basically let MTN and others sell the last mile. And in that environment, they said but you have to make this base rate this lower cost. The problem was everybody bought in. And so Rwanda has an issue where the cell coverage is not that effective because it's too inexpensive for the infrastructure that's there to make it available. So a lot of people are moving to fiber. The other thing you can do in Africa is you do point-to-point connections to a city center. So I'm going to send something out, and then you build a mesh network from the city. And then when you open up your phone, you actually get on Wi-Fi. And so that allows you to provide a low-cost, effectively learning materials, communication, so on and so forth. All you have to do is come to the city center. The advantage that it also has is it's really good for the shops that are there. If you can be anywhere in the city center and do it, people will come into the city center to check their email and to interact with people, and then they'll go buy a couple things, and then they'll go home. So those are things that are but it's a real challenge in Africa. But it's different there than it is here. Here we have a lot of infrastructure, and we're doling it out in small amounts for profit. There, they have a very small amount of infrastructure that is that they have to kind of take care of because there's just too many people for the number of points. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks again, what attracts users to dedicated closed content consumption platforms like the PlayStation versus platforms like iOS, tvOS, or the PC Mac?
Go ahead, Nigel.
I think there are lots of reasons. I think some people like to game on standalone machines. I think that gamers like to be on the latest technology, like camera buffs like to have the latest technology. I think there are titles. I think it's just a different ecosystem, and they want to be part of a different ecosystem.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and to that as well, it all depends on the titles that are available, where one might be on PlayStation versus similar to all the over-the-top streaming platforms where you subscribe to everything if you want to watch everything and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Atari, the old Atari, you can get the old Atari. We just got it. My kids love it. Centipede's very popular in the house. So I think it's so funny. You have all these new games and we're playing Centipede and Space Invaders. But anyway, next question.
Norma HS from San Jose. Is the new iPhone cinematic mode a Filmicpro killer? Their main trick is pulling focus.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If their main trick is just pulling focus, then I would say no, because Filmicpro does so much more to a regular. If you're using the regular Apple camera versus going into Filmicpro, you'll get the thirds to frame your content. You'll get a little bit more adjustability and focus in aperture and all that other stuff. So if Apple still keeps the cinematic mode as basic as it is, Filmicpro will be able to put a whole bunch of little bells and whistles in to make it even better.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
It was cinematic mode was cool, but am I the only one who felt like it felt a little gimmicky to me? It wasn't clean. It didn't feel clean to me. Maybe I'm the only one.
No, it's not going to. For those of us who shoot with cinematic, it's not replacing a deep, focus puller. I think it's not. It's going to be, for many people, it's going to be really fun, and it's going to improve the quality of their average videos, and things are going to look good. My little training videos will probably look really nice with it. I shoot fun stuff with portrait all the time. I'm just like, this looks really cool. It doesn't work all the time, so you shoot it and you go, okay, it's not something I would charge a client to go do. But I think that it's a fun trick. The big thing is Filmicpro gives you a lot of tools, and rarely does Apple release features into their own photo app that they don't provide back to the developers to implement. They're not trying to compete with their developers. So I imagine that Filmicpro could do anything that within the year, do anything with that the phone is doing, that the photo app is doing now. Because Apple's not trying to. I mean, the photo app is there to make to keep on pushing the envelope forward. But what they want is people to build apps and sell them on the App Store. so they're not gonna. It's just kind of a show of the technology. Now, next question.
Juan C. Robles of Mexico. Is it possible to have access to some of the files used yesterday in the lab with Charles Kline?
So what happened was last night, Charles and I have been talking about this way that we've been color correcting cameras, and so. I have this idea that in after hours, we could have people just kind of show up and talk about something if they feel like showing up and talking about something, because a lot of times it's just hard to schedule around our production schedules. So rather than trying to do that, Charles was like, I'm available right now. I was like, okay, should we, let's just jump into after hours and we'll just do what we're going to talk about, rather than I'm very, I've really been thinking about this concept of saving knowledge in people rather than trying to write it down or codify it or anything else, is that let's just show it to people. So instead of right when I had access to Charles, he hasn't had time to jump into office hours. And so we just went through this process of color correcting Blackmagic cameras with LUTs. You could theoretically do it with other cameras that have LUTs. But using Resolve and how he approaches it was pretty genius. Now we hope to bring him on to office hours for a second hour. We just didn't know when that was going to happen. And to be honest, I needed to know it this week, so because I got 11 cameras to deal with on Saturday. So we were kind of working through that. And anyway, so there were some files up there. We can't make those files available, but I can't create new ones. So if you remind me next week to create them, if someone pings me, I will create new ones. I have the same chart right here next to me, so I can. It's not hard for me to build a new set of them. But I can't use those ones because they have some other stuff in them that I can't show. Next question.
Johnny Estelles of Manila. I recently joined Adam Tao's podcast to announce our release of the companion module for MixEffect. I'm so used to being on the back end of a show, I felt very nervous, uncomfortable being on cam. Any tip on what I can do to feel more at ease?
Go ahead, David.
Practice, practice, practice. Be aware that you're the product expert, and that's why you're there. And in the immortal words of Mike Brady telling Jan about public speaking, picture them in their underwear.
Go ahead, David.
I would suggest also, and this is one of the powerful things about Zoom, is just you're having a conversation with someone. It's especially powerful about office hours. You're just having a conversation with someone. It's you and that other individual. When you don't think about the large audience, when you think about just one person that you're speaking to, we're usually pretty good at that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I watched that broadcast, and Johnny, you looked fine. There wasn't a scintilla of nervousness that came through. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Actually, David made my point. Talk to one person, don't talk to everybody.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Just do some deep breaths, some meditation. If you got an Apple Watch, do the breathing exercise for at least a minute right before you go on to do it. That'll help you control your insides from feeling like they're gonna come out.
Join the panel. Come join us on the panel here. You get to do it every day in a relatively easygoing way. The best, as David said earlier, the best way to get good at something is to practice it. And this is a pretty easy group to practice it with, and it's a great way for you to just kind of build your chops. That's why we're doing it every day, is trying to build up that process. So I would recommend jumping on the panel with us. You can start in after hours and then move to office hours. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what makes Dorrough meters popular in broadcast facilities versus other types of metering? I see them in pictures of radio studios, for example.
Go ahead, Marty.
So VU meters and peak reading meters, they're reading electrical energy, that's flowing through the wires. And what the Dorrough meter did that was different than any other meters that were available at the time was it measured loudness of the audio signal. So the perceived loudness of how loud you sound versus something else. And that was really unique because it's a different way of measuring the sound. And on radio, where there are compressors and limiters and other devices that control what goes out to the transmitter to protect from clipping, loudness was everything. Loudness is where it's at. So it was a different way of measuring, and it was very effective. Today, now we have LUFS meters, which also measure loudness energy in different ways and can be more effective than the Dorroughs, but the Dorroughs are very basic and easy to read, and so they're still very popular.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Excellent answer, Marty. I just want to add to it and simply say that Dorrough meters showed the relative RMS to peak in a visual sense, so you can instantly tell how loud it is by looking at it visually.
I love having them in front of me, but I would prefer digital ones at this point because I'm used to having a whole set of digital scopes. So for someone who knows what they're looking at, the Dorrough meters are really great. For someone who is just technical, who wants these scopes, I found that I got more information. So I used to have the Dorrough meters, but I finally gave them up, but they were so great. Next question.
Stuart F. from Melbourne, Australia. He asks, Anthony on Linus Tech Tips pointed out that one of the new iPads is basically a wide version of the same hardware that's in the new iPhone 13, but with USB-C. Instead of Lightning connector, will this affect the sales?
Go ahead, David.
He must be talking about the iPad mini because I think that's the only one that got the USB-C. And I think for many people that will be a drawback because they've got a gazillion lightning cables lying around the house. For me personally, that's a huge plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all the new iPads, have been moving to USB-C. Did we ever see the bottom of any of the phones?
I don't think we saw any of them.
I don't think we saw the bottom.
That was the problem. I talked about that. I think that they're keeping the Lightning connector because in the next two models we're going to start seeing them get rid of the connectors altogether for MagSafe. And I think what the iPad Mini, the goal of that is to appease anybody that needs to have a connection. A musician, for example, that needs to connect directly rather than through a Bluetooth or through a wireless connection. So I have a feeling this is going to be poised to a different type of audience rather than an iPad audience.
Next question.
Sorry. Eddie Martinez from Palo Cedro. I thought I heard mention of an Isadora second hour or Saturday. When is that so I can plan accordingly? It's not in the email update.
We're still working on it. I think that there might be a Friday thing that's going on, so I have to let me find it with Talok. I'm not positive of that, so we'll get back to you about that and let you know tomorrow. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. I've seen OLED TVs, and he references an LG CX, used as computer monitors. What specific settings would you need to change to make them most useful as computer monitors?
Gaming. I think we talked about it yesterday. You want to set it to gaming mode because otherwise you'll see latency as it does all the processing. So the gaming will turn off the processing. Marty, real quick.
Yeah, I was wondering about this because when I was looking into OLED TVs for digital signage and for projection or substitute for projection for like lyrics and text and stuff, I was warned about screen burn-in because they were very sensitive to static images. So, we have a lot of static text and stuff on our computer monitors, and it just doesn't seem. When
we use OLED, we use it as a second monitor that we're pushing stuff out that's pure video, or it's pure, like it's a video monitor, but it's not something we're using on a day-to-day basis. To your point, you do not want to use an OLED as your main monitor. It will burn in quickly. so we're told that we could do it for hours now with lower thirds or something like that. But generally, if you watch anything that I do that's in HDR, I'll try to limit all of my graphics to 400 nits or below. And then I also try to keep it moving. So you'll never see it sit anywhere for more than about 15 seconds. And we do it even when we have an announcement, like if it's in HDR, you'll just see it slowly moving down, or we'll be moving something underneath it or something else to keep flushing those pixels. But you do have to pay a lot of attention to that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, if you're participating in remote keyboard music lessons, would a standard camera looking at you be enough? Or would you also need a camera looking at the keyboard itself? Should the second camera be clamped to the keyboard?
And just letting our viewers know, or producers know, that we will be getting to the second hour in about 3 or 4 minutes. We're just going to burn through these. Go ahead, David.
I have a friend who teaches guitar and keyboard, and he prefers kind of a 3/4 shot, so at least you can see the reaction and what they're trying to do on keys. It's a tricky one, but doable.
Yep, Jeffrey.
The best thing to do, especially, and it really depends on what type of keyboard you're learning. If you're learning classical piano versus rock and roll keyboards, in that case, for classical piano, the person that usually likes to stand right here, either on the left or the right side. And the reason why is because they can see the whole keyboard. They can see the hands if they're flat or if they're up, raised in a position that they're supposed to be. You can also see the feet with the sustain pedal and things like that. As for clamping on the keyboard, I wouldn't do it because if it's just a cheap keyboard on a stand, it's just going to shake like no tomorrow.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. An article in Sports Video Group mentions the spontaneous in-person production meeting was an asset to ESPN's College Game Day. Could an AH-like 24-hour accessible space or a party line chat channel fill a similar role for distributed workflows?
Absolutely. I think After Hours is like the perfect open office because you can go in whenever you can join the open office whenever you need to. You can get out of it whenever you need to. You can just listen whenever you want to. You can talk when you want to. There's a whole, it is the ultimate, it's becoming the ultimate open offices of what we want. We're not stuck with it, but we have it when we need it. Next question.
Douglas is getting his money's worth today. Douglas Carmichael, how did MITK become connected to the OH community?
Sky Gleason. So Sky's been he's an OG, and he had this crazy, he's working on this thing, and we were like, hey, how do we help? How do we find a way that we can learn and you can get something out of it? And so then we met Madeline, and and then we moved on. That's how we did it. It's all Sky's fault. Next question.
Norma HS, San Jose, on the Hyperdeck media or for playback, can one mix types of ProRes clips like a mix of 422 and 444?
Go ahead, John.
Ugh, that's all I have to say. I've gone through about 30 different iterations of trying to get media to play back on the new Hyperdeck, and the only ones that worked for me so far are Apple ProRes 422 HQ done in compressor. And I'll let you know on the 444. Hit me up in Discord.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
As I said earlier, Blackmagic is stating ProRes 4444 is their preferred method, particularly if you're doing a key.
And we do everything. We rarely use 4444 because we use other things for our keys. But so 422 will work, but we do everything through. Back to that, we do everything through compressor. We have a set compressor conform. It literally says 422 Hyperdeck conform, and so everything. I don't care. Even if you say it's 422, we will put it through that compressor setting and re-encode it. And it has to be the same frame rate. It has to be the same. And I've got a couple of them because we have a couple of different frame rates we work with, but it has to be the same frame rate, the same number of channels, the same, you force everything, same resolution, same everything going through it, or it'll take the first one it sees. And if anything that's different than that, it just ignores them. They don't show up at all. So go ahead, David.
Is there a way in a product like Frame.io or other to have that as a workflow, so you just have people deliver it to one place and it'll do that kind of conversion on the fly? Or
yeah, there is actually. You have a person with a Mac Mini and compressor. It's amazing.
Compressor only. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen other people use media encoder and a lot of other things, but having a droplet that is the thing. You could probably do it with FFmpeg. So you could probably do a watch folder with FFmpeg. It doesn't matter that it's compressor. It matters that it's the same. So you should be able to you could set up a script that had a watch folder that was using FFmpeg in the command line, and then just went, I see a new file, bring it in here, run it, push it out here. And I'm sure that we could sit down and probably in an afternoon have a drop folder that did that. And I'm sure it would look just as good. It's just that I have compressor, and it's a relatively straightforward thing. Go ahead, John.
I tried to encode for ProRes 422s out of Adobe Media Encoder, and they wouldn't recognize them on Hyperdeck.
I would not use Adobe Media Encoder for ProRes. It's good for H.264, and it's good for a couple other things, but I wouldn't. It's also if you're a Mac user, it's super slow compared to compressor. I mean, when you get used to compressor, it's hard to go back. All right. So now we're going to change subjects to our second hour, starting just a little bit late. And we do have a lot of questions for the second hour, so we'll dive right into it. Rupert McCrae. Oh, sorry, I started reading the questions for you.
That was
go
good,
ahead, Mitchell. Go ahead.
Rupert
go ahead,
McCrae,
Mitchell.
Dallas, Texas. Where is audience interaction during a virtual Apple keynote?
It's on Twitter. It's on other things. It's not on. Unfortunately, it's not with us. And it's not with Apple. I don't think that Apple wants that. So I don't think they're asking for your input. I think that Apple puts enough effort into how they want to say something that they just want to say it and then let you have a discussion about what that means. And I think there's an opportunity for us, whether it's Mac Break or Mac, other things for us to decide, for us to interact with it. But I think Apple, the conversations really are occurring at Twit in after hours. In other things, there's like all these watch parties that occur that people are discussing those things. Do I think Apple could benefit from that? Absolutely. But the problem really is this, even when I say events need to be interactive, events at the scale that Apple's talking about would be very hard to be interactive because you're talking about tens of millions of viewers, at a time. And that's something that I don't have a solution for. I have a solution like the largest events that I've done, we interact with 150, 200,000. When we get over that number, 200,000 is the number that starts to become, now I think that the future of media is 200,000, a lot of 200,000s. I think that it's, I don't think that we will see a handful of them, but I think the idea of having a show that can aggregate 4 to 5 million people 10 years from now will be very low. It's going to be, many things there's so much media in so many wide swaths. I think the idea of getting 4 to 5 million people watching the same thing at the same time will happen a couple times a year. So I think it's a different problem, but Apple has that. And that's a hard one. Next question.
Daniel Ray Villegas of Santa Cruz, California. Were there any production techniques, edits, camera techniques that anyone picked up as special or unique to Apple during the commercials hype segments?
Go ahead, John.
So the one interesting transition that I thought that I had to think about was when they transitioned from one kind of landscape view to another and they flipped it upside down. And what were they trying to tell us with that transition? Kind of like every wipe in Star Wars was a clock effect, which is easy to understand, but the flipping of the horizon, I thought took a little bit more thinking.
Yeah. what I think is that it really felt like they were finding new ways to transition from one place to the other, and they were mixing compositing effects, some 3D effects. They were also mixing also just really basic physical ones. I think one of the ones we talked about on Mac Break yesterday was there was a point where Tim Cook walks from the desert into the stage. And it was, when you look at it actually cut together, it's not as smooth as it would feel. But what he did is we realized they just took a piece of stage and put it out in the desert and polished it off and had him just walk onto it and take a couple steps. And it probably wasn't even Tim Cook because it never showed him. It just showed feet of someone who has legs that look roughly like Tim Cook, and so they shot that close up of his legs stepping onto that. And a lot of times when you see that, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that what's interesting in that puzzle is that they might have thought about that later. Like, he's in the desert, he's now on stage, we need a transition. Let's just go out to the desert with something and shoot it. So that's the advantage. I will say, so I think that a lot of those transitions were really, really well done and really expensive. Just in case you're wondering, like what I look at with Apple is that the reason it's worth us looking at it, and we'll look at a couple of the frames. We're not going to show any video until the very end of this, so that if YouTube kills the stream, I don't want to lose the whole show. So anyway, but I think that it's really well done, and I think that it's worth us digging into and constantly talking about and learning from a video production perspective of how to do it. We're going to talk about it a little bit today, but I think in after hours we can't stream some of this stuff. We'll probably do some kind of frame.
Why do you think they're doing such advanced wipes, Alex? Just to keep it entertaining?
Yeah, just to show off. It's just flexing. Like there's, I think that it's this is their moment to create an effect, to make it fun to watch and to get you thinking about it and get you, part of it is getting you excited to watch it. Like you want to go, their job is to entertain us, and to have us, have a little bit of surprise and delight, as it says, and that's a different, that's a whole different process. It's as much entertainment, getting users excited that they have bought into a ecosystem that, is cool, so there's a cool factor that they're trying to also get there. Next question.
Keel Holiday of Carlton says, how would you improve Apple's production? Anything you would change?
I would do it in HDR. So they're doing it in spatial, but I don't think they were doing it in high dynamic range yesterday. So unless I was looking at, I tried to look at it on my iPad, I didn't see it. So I would increase that. I do think that there is one thing that I do think has happened is that I feel like their presentation has gotten better as far as the skill sets of the presenters. I also would say that the downside of that, I don't know if anyone else noticed. I talked about it a little bit in after hours. I felt like the audio for the presenters was bad. Like it was all over the place. So there was capped off high ends. There was it just sounded muffled in a lot of places. My guess is that it was overprocessed. I really thought about it. I just think that it was echoey where they were. If you look at the rooms where it looked really muffled, there was where I felt like it sounded muffled anyway. And now it could have been also how they were delivering to immersive. So they could have put it in channels in a way that made it sound that way.
But how were you listening? Because I had my speakers on my iMac and then I had cans on for after hours, and I saw you put on.
So I was listening. So I had my in-ear. I had the Bumblebees in my ears for after hours, and I had the AirPod Maxes over that. And I was checking, like, is this affecting? Like, isn't the Bumblebees affecting it? But there were places where I was hearing high end. So there was places that I was definitely hearing the high end sounds and the surround and all the other stuff. But there were places when they were talking, especially in locations where I just felt like there wasn't a lot of high end. I felt like there was a kind of a muffled nature to it, and I think that I just felt like there was something missing there, but I couldn't quite figure out what it is. My guess was, again, that was just processed because they were shooting a lot of wide shots where there's no place to put the mics, so they're gonna have to hide a lav, and it could have been messy. to do it there. Now in Hollywood, we would just do ADR. So we would just, have them do it again, and that probably is the next step for that kind of thing. The reason we're used to hearing the audio perfect is because we ADR in the United States, we ADR everything. So, or a huge percentage of things. And so we're used to just crystal clear audio all the time. And so I think that that's what we were not getting from the audio that they had. Next question.
Eric Price of Kansas City. This crowd notwithstanding, is there a point where the production becomes so slick that it detracts from the message or turns off the viewer?
Go ahead, John.
So this is the rookie mistake that you see a lot. If somebody gets a new switcher, especially a TriCaster has about 500 wipes, and they used every wipe in a production, or one of those Panasonics that has all the different wipes. It's a rookie mistake. It's like using too many different fonts on a flyer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
When I first got into post in the mid 90s, we bought a NewTek video toaster. And the first paid client we had, my business partner at the time, did the edit. And I called him up like halfway through the day and I go, "How's it going?" He goes, "Oh, it's going great." I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, he wants to see every effect on every shot." It's like, "Well, show me. He goes, "We're going to make a fortune with this thing. This edit is taking forever." And it was exactly that. It was like the, Lisa Simpson star wipe thing. Yeah. I find that the best pieces that I cut are just cuts. And if you do too much, it's because you can't figure out where to put the cut. Production can definitely take away from a message. I think you're muted, Alex. Maybe it's me.
No, it's me. I do think that there's a lot of, I think that there is a lot of value. The transitions were a lot of fun. Like if we can take you on an adventure for those transitions, it's not just a wipe. I think some of the stuff that Apple did, like the best transition I've seen Apple do so far was the bee, or, like the bee flying through the grass.
The grass, yeah.
I gotta tell you, like
Honey,
I think that my last whole keynote that I worked on, that I did everything for, probably cost less than that transition. So when I saw it, I was like, that's real money. Like that's like, that's like cha-ching, because that's like CG. That was a CG, thing, and a CG grass and a CG thing, and then there was lots of effects, and I was like, that cost money.
Well done.
Yeah, yeah. I would bid 200, 300 for that shot. So anyway, it was so anyway, so I think that, again, surprising the audience and getting them excited about it is fun if you're willing to put the time into it. But simple wipes isn't enough. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, but what I appreciate this question, because what I want to know is, are these effects, in these transitions, are they things that people using the products can actually duplicate?
Well, I don't think I think going from San Diego to Cupertino, I don't think matters. Whether you can do it or not. As far as what Apple is pretty careful about, like, the stuff that when they say it's being shot with the phone, it's being shot with the phone. And so they're showing you things that they can do on it. Now, it can be shot with the phone with a bunch of lights and a professional crew and a set and all those things. But I think that the phone is able to put those bits out, the way that they're showing there. But I don't think they're purporting to do the whole keynote on the phone, which would be cool. There'll be some. I bet you there'll be some point where they do.
It would be great. It kind of like the day that Steve introduced Keynote, when he said, "Oh, and by the way, I've been using it for the last 3 months or whatever, or the last couple of shows." It would be great if they finished a keynote and they said, "Oh, and by the way,
we shot the whole thing with
the iPhone 15, whatever." Yeah.
And I don't think we're that far away. I would be blown away if we don't see Apple shoot an entire keynote in the next 3 years, on a phone. Like it would, it's close. It's not quite there yet, but I think that they maybe not the phone keynote. And the funny thing is, maybe not the phone keynote, because the problem is there's $100 billion riding on that keynote. So it's
here's why I don't think that's too likely. It has only been, I'm trying to think if this is insider knowledge. I don't care. The last WWDC, it's not you. This is all on me.
Okay.
The WWDC was all cut in Final Cut this year and the year before, but up till then, not. All of the modules,
All the sessions?
all the sessions were all cut in Final Cut.
Oh, they have been for a while. I don't think I can say any more about that.
Well, you can't, but I know that in internal videos, only in the last 5
Are you talking about
years-
internal videos, or are you talking about cutting the sessions themselves?
Well, specifically, I was talking about cutting the sessions. But
Okay.
in addition to that fact, which maybe I have wrong, I know for a fact that their internal videos only in the last 5 years went to being an all Apple workflow. And so
Right.
I think that there has been a culture of, well, we're going to use the right tool, when I think they should have, the day they released Final Cut, they should have said, nope, everything gets cut on this.
Well, I think that
And we scale things to make it work in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my personal opinion about this is, and I don't know whether it's an antitrust thing or it's just too much stress or whatever. If I were Apple, I would tell the folks that are making all this stuff for Apple TV, one scene out of every show, or one scene per season. I need you to do it all in Apple products. I need the graphics to be done with motion. I need the Final Cut or whatever. We'll pay you a bunch of extra money for it. Like we'll give you the specialists to do it all. It'll look exactly the same as everything else that you're doing. But we want to do it all in Final Cut, and we all want to do it all in motion, and we want to do whatever the Apple things that you want to show, and have them just one scene per season per show, to do it all in Final Cut. And then the idea is take that, and it can be something that doesn't have all the main actors in it. It can even be just a couple cuts. The main thing about that is that then you take that footage and you release it to Final Cut users. You own it. Like this is the biggest problem with sample footage, is that you never own it, but you could own it. You could just say, I own this. Here's the logic file that it took to do this. Here's the edit that it took to do this. Here's the, for the scene. Here is the, so the idea is that you dump, you take the content that you bought, that you own, and you funnel just one scene into it to let people see what it takes to do it. And it would.
Why pull the punch? Why not just say Ted Lasso cut in Final Cut Pro?
Yeah, because you're still dealing with the politics of, you're still dealing with Hollywood studios and Hollywood folks, and you'd end up with a lot of groaning and blah, 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 and all this stuff.
Get over it.
They may not. That's the problem. It's complicated. It's a right now. Streaming content. If Apple had gotten, you're absolutely right. If Apple had gotten into streaming content 5 years earlier, where they were the only game in town, they could tell everybody, they could just dictate to everybody what they want. The problem right now is that, if you tweak them and they complain to their director, or they say, well, we would have got, because here's what'll happen is it won't be true, but they'll go back and say, well, we would have gotten this shot done on time and on budget, but it was all Final Cut's fault. And then the director's going to be like, what?
If I could have cut Navid, I would have got more Emmys.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, but I think that saying that, because the other thing it does is it dog foods Final Cut. So you have these editors shoot it in Final Cut. You pay them a bunch of extra money. Like to them, it's a payday. To shoot like the Final Cut scene is, we're going to double everybody's pay. You're already spending $15 million an episode or something like that. So like pay the editor extra for, like, they get double pay to do Final Cut instead of Avid. You're going to keep all the files, so that you can distribute them. You pay the actors whatever they need for that distribution. You pay real money for it, because what it would do is it would go then owning Final Cut would be the thing. Like it would be if you own Final Cut, you get raw files. And you could pick, you literally don't need to do it. You could do it once a month. For all these shows they're putting out, it could be 12 scenes from all the shows are done this way every year. So that once a month, just like Unreal puts out new models, once a month Apple puts out a new project. And I think they should do the same thing with music. They've already done it with Billie Eilish.
Right.
And they should be doing that every week. Here's a logic file of someone, and just pay them real money to do that, because it's not just pushing your products, it's also pushing your it's teaching everybody how to use the products and how to create more content, for you. It's and a lot of times, this is where I still think that a lot of times we're in this hunter-gathering, mentality all the time about everything. Like, let's find people who can do this. Let's find people who can do this. Let's find people who can do that, as opposed to farming. Like when you build an apple orchard, you're thinking 20 years away. Like you're like, I'm going to plant a seed, I'll put water on it, and I'm going to do things, and I'm going to let it sit in the sun, and I'm going to give it real estate, and I'm going to do all things. And 20 years from now, it's going to come out the other end. And that's what I think more companies are going to need to do. And you can see that with things like, you can see that approach with Google, Grow with Google. They put money into Udacity. They put money into Khan Academy. They donated money to figure this out. And now they have Grow with Google, and they're not depending on the universities anymore. They're building a huge farm team, I don't know where we stopped here. Marty, go ahead. Sorry, I went off.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I think that's a really intriguing idea. If Apple is paying to have scenes produced on Apple products, and then they release the information on how that video was shot and all of the details about the transition, how this was made, and release that out to the public, then people who are trying to figure it out, even, at whatever level they are, have the opportunity to see how these professional things were done. I think that's a fabulous idea.
And we'll see what happens. Go ahead, Mitchell. I've been saying that for 2 decades, so I don't know if it'll. Go ahead, Mitchell.
The surprise gag for them should be they should shoot the entire show with the backup camera on the new Apple car before they introduce it.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Next question is James from Dublin, Ireland. Apple used great locations for most of the keynote, but had Tim on a dark stage, in an empty auditorium. It felt at odds with the rest of the keynote, a throwback to times past. What are the panel's thoughts?
Chris?
Yeah, as Carmi says, it's a throwback to the before times. I think part of it might be they wanted to use the theater. Second part, I think it has a feel. It definitely has a feel, but it absolutely didn't need to. It didn't need to be that.
I have a theory. So these things take time. Like, I have no idea when they started working on this. I think that they thought they were going to be in the stage when they designed the keynote. So I think that when they designed the keynotes don't get done in September. They get done in April. So if you roll back to April, May, June, somewhere in that where everything was going to be fine, I think that the play was to do the keynote where I think what we saw there was actually not something to the past, but something to the future, which is that you bring a bunch of press in and Tim throws to video segments. I think this is where they figured out how to get from to still have the physical experience and still have somebody on stage instead of you just walking in and watching a movie. You get to see Tim. You sat in the same room as Tim, and then you watched. But Tim is literally just clipping together.
Right.
He's
running a clip show. He's running a clip show.
I think what we saw was the future. When they in post-COVID, you have Tim announcing things, which I think is a great model, actually. I think it's a great way to just transition back and forth. It gives because I don't think, I kept on thinking about watching these keynotes going, I don't know how they go back. Like, how do you go back to a stage event? Because I can tell you watching other people's stage events, the ones that they try to recreate the stage, they're so, like, you suddenly realize how slow and ugly and boring they are, and because Apple just keeps on adding more and more production value to what they're doing. I think that what we saw was the future, is that it'll be Tim announcing video clips and then moving on, to the next video clip, but he's just literally just patching it through. Kind of like America's Funniest Home Videos, but with Apple products. Next question.
Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia. How much of the keynote was shot on an iPhone?
I think only the stuff. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, same thing. What you were going to say. The stuff that they said, this was shot on an iPhone. I think that there's too much push in our community, production community, some people, like, I need to do this on a phone. Why isn't this more pro? I don't think Apple doesn't care. they're making a great camera if people use it for, a B-roll shot, or I need a plate out this window or whatever. That's fine. I've used my phone several times on location where I was like, oh, I need 6 characteristic photos of an empty theater. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, I got it done. I didn't have to go get the photog or whatever. But they're not trying to make the next cinema camera.
Right.
They're poking around at it, but they're not trying to push it. If people use it, awesome.
Next question.
Sorry about the delay. Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. If the Apple Keynote was all played out, when do you think production was completed?
Go ahead, Chris.
About an hour before we saw it. Maybe 2.
Yeah.
I think the rule of post-production is if you give me a week, I will take the week. And
we have to remember that, like with one at that level and where they're getting to it, what we call finished though is different. So I think that there might have been little tweaks, but I think that most likely the content itself was probably all shot 2 or 3 weeks before a minimum. I mean, the last thing shot, it was probably shot all summer, and then it was probably cleaned up, and then it went into color and sound sweetening. So, but probably color and sound were probably 2 or 3 weeks of, for that, where there wasn't anything else to do in it. And they still can add like a little edit or do a little thing, but I think that for the most part, it was probably done that way.
He did say, when do you think it was completed? So that includes all those little tweaks.
I know, I'm saying all those little things, but I think to your point, is probably done the week before, finished a couple days before, the week before, to do that. So,
and what we've been seeing a whole lot of is, and you've seen this as well, Alex, is we'll get a call and somebody will say, I need 3 weeks of post. And the first question we ask is, when is the event actually? And they go, well, it's actually a week and a half after we're done with post. And our pushback is, so what you're saying is you need 4.5 weeks of post. Oh no, we're going to be done. No, you won't. You just won't. And we've just gotten to the point where we're saving dates in calendars because we know they'll fill up with, there's another thing we have to do.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is that Apple had great captions. That happens after you're done. It had audio description. It had dubbing. It had all the languages. It had ASL. It had, all these other things, and all those things didn't happen live. Those all were part of the post process. Now, a lot of that, once you lock picture, so that's the big thing is that once you lock picture on the thing and say all we're doing is sound sweetening and color correction, now you can start doing stuff. It's just getting someone, and I think Apple is better at locking than others. So next question.
I thought we had somebody else in there asking it. Sorry.
Oh, did we? Did I skip somebody?
Preto
Sorry.
had a comment.
Preto, go ahead.
I was going to say we were our own worst clients because we did productions on when I was doing cryptocurrency presentations around the world. All my partners would show up at the event an hour ahead of time with their PowerPoints. Yeah. No rehearsals, and I always had to show up like 6 hours ahead of time, work with the production crews, and take all their PowerPoints, get the matching fonts, change them from 4:3 into 16:9. We were horrible.
Well, and I can tell you this is the difference between Apple and everybody else, and this is why we pay attention to these keynotes, and this is why we talk about it, and this is why we should look at it. Is the reason it's the gold standard is when I spoke at WWDC in 2007. I mean, it was 6 weeks of meetings, like 6 weeks of reviews of my slide deck, and picking at things and doing things. And then even then they rebuilt the whole thing, and so it, and there's lots of discussion about, do we really need this like 3 weeks before, 4 weeks before? And remember, I'm one of 110 sessions, not a keynote. I'm just one of the sessions. And they're like 3 weeks out going, do we really need this slide? Because I think we could do it without that slide. like that's, I mean, so the level of detail is stunning, in a lot of those. Next question.
Randy Crum from Dallas, Texas. Thoughts on how the Apple Keynote events are using the Apple Keynote application?
Go ahead, Chris.
I had a discussion with somebody once when I was doing some work for Apple, and I made some comment about, I think I saw a new transition in Keynote when Steve was on stage, and they looked at me and they said, you do realize he has all the resources in the world to have anything custom animated that he wants. And I was like, good point. so a lot of, I mean, they can do anything they want.
That
Does
said,
it end up in the production tool one day? Maybe.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of things Keynote can do, and there's a lot of things Keynote can do easily. You can do a lot of custom animation. You can do a lot of things in Keynote that are really hard to do, but you can do them. And if you're willing to spend the time on it, I will say almost everything I see when they show those slides are stuff that Keynote can do. You know, like it's that you can just throw together. And I'm starting to really love their little card thing that they've been doing the last couple. You know, they have these
Yeah.
lots
Those
of
are great.
cards of all the
I like it when they
information.
start close on it and then they pull out to reveal more data about the thing.
And that's all a Keynote. That's all a Keynote slide, a transition.
It could be. I
It's
don't
magic
think it
move.
is.
It's magic.
It's maybe. I'll tell you my favorite motion graphics these days in terms of educational stuff. Go to the Apple stores and look at the stuff that's just on the screens. I love them. I could sit there all day and just watch them. My wife keeps going, "Can we go now? Can we go now? Can we go now?"
Yeah.
Hold on, I have to find the end of the loop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. And I have to admit that one of the reasons I defend Apple so much when I say, like, don't change anything with what they're doing is that there's just there's only like one or two companies in the world that are like just trying to tweak everything, like just trying to like make everything like they're no longer worried about money. I mean, they are. I mean, they're worried about it to some degree. There's someone at Apple paying attention to it, but there's so many things that Apple does that is not like, what's the ROI on this execution? What is the thing? It's just like, how do we make it great? And what is the best way to execute that? And you see it all the time everywhere of just like, we want to pay attention to these fine little details, which is really a lot of fun. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. How can someone without the $1 million budget achieve the great ads or ASL production quality for a live event? Is it even possible with most streaming platforms?
Go ahead, Chris.
So live event, more difficult, but even still, I would say most live things that we're working on are actually just playouts of highly, edited things. What we do is we wait till a session is done. Once it gets approved, we kick it out to the ASL people. There are plenty of ASL people that'll set up a iPhone or whatever against a white wall in their house. Doesn't look great, but it looks okay. And they'll do their thing. And then we bring that in and sync it up with the audio that's, bleeding over in the room. And you put it in a box and you put a border around it. And you squeeze it back. You do the little thing.
So,
and then if you're lucky, you get Garrett Morris in the corner screaming. There's an old reference. Sorry.
We did a couple hundred ASL lives in the last fall, and the big thing is a gray background, Lazulite, 6x7. We sent them to them. like this is what we need. So you partner with a handful of ASL, that are going to fulfill those things. So when you do ASL, there's a bunch of other discussions. What are the issues around diversity? What are the issues around their connectivity if we're doing it over Zoom, because we were doing them over Zoom? What are the issues around their availability? What are the issues around? There's all these questions that you have about who you're putting up there. Then a couple of big soft lights in front of them makes a huge difference. Having them have something darker in front of the gray, kind of frames it. You want to get their kind of just a little below chest, like stomach to head, because of where they move their hands, and you'll see that in the Apple one. And you can get something that looks very close to what Apple did. Not quite as good. Like theirs was probably shot on an Airy in a studio. Like everything is like I when I see as someone who's done hundreds of ASLs, I looked at that. I was like, wow, that is a good ASL. like I want to send that to everyone. Going, this is what yours should look like.
I will say the Google I/O or whatever it was called, their implementation of reveal the ASL was much sexier. It was a little animated pushback to reveal it. Yeah. Whereas the Apple one, you actually had to go to a different URL, watch a different video, hit play again, which was kind of bogus. But
I did like the fact that Apple just really customized to make sure that your viewing experience was perfect as an ASL viewer, and it was not, and it was solid. I will say that also the number of people watching the Apple one versus the Google one is an order of magnitude different. So you all those little transitions and anything that's special in the frame becomes more complicated at that scale. so it's you worry about its stability.
I thought it was interesting that even though they squeezed back the presentation, they squeezed back the ASL, if you went so far as to turn on the closed captioning also, the closed captioning actually intruded on the presentation window. They could have bumped it, and it wasn't by much. It was like maybe 15 pixels.
It's one of the things that I plan to experiment with as we go into Office Hours 2.0 is that we have so much real estate in lots of places. Like, where can we put all this stuff and like play with it? Because we're designing it. We're not trying to make it available for everybody. We can make it available for just us. You know, so we can. I
could show you some things we've been working on, and it's a bunch of Swiss cheese. It's like, and here's the box for this, and this thing's going to go in this little rectangle, and
right. But we're trying to figure out like how can we add that stuff in. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. How many different platforms was the Apple Keynote streamed to? And what were some differences in the viewing and the listening experience?
You want to think about all those platforms separately because they really are, so they're different, oftentimes different players and different things like that. So you had there's one that's going to go out to like Firefox and Edge and Android and so on and so forth. And I don't know what that is in the past. When you've looked at if you look at the developer code on Chrome, it's been like HLS.js or whatever. So then there's the Apple TV, Apple iOS, the Safari, browser. So those are all going to be a little bit different. I think a lot of them look pretty much the same. The big thing that I noticed was that in Safari and in the iPad, which is where I looked at it, we were definitely hearing spatial audio, which sounded significantly better. So the music was just kind of like, oh, it's all here. And what happens is that what's interesting about spatial audio is when you create a bunch of stuff out here, the voice sounds more present, but it also can sound more muffled, which is part of why I think that we heard this kind of weird thing that was there that maybe didn't make as much sense. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Was that just me, or was this keynote a much slower feel than the past? Was it just because of the camera focus or a lack of exciting features to feature?
Go ahead, Chris.
I thought in recent times, COVID times, I thought the pacing was about the same. I was very drawn into it to the point where I had to turn off the office hours or after hours back chatter because I really wanted to hear it. Yeah. I thought it was super compelling.
Yeah, I thought it was actually one of the fastest ones I've seen. Like as far as I thought the last one, which I like some of the transitions, but I really felt like the open was really slow. And I think that they've gotten good at, they know which parts we're not watching, and so they skip over them quickly. So like they say them and then they go, okay, now we're done.
I have a question. Do you think, and I apologize, I was taking Trish to work, but I would subtitle this transition a love letter to California. I don't know if you guys have talked about this, and I think it paid off that there was this unified theme that we saw very strong in the beginning of all the performers basically doing a remotes music video, performing literally all over the state, from the deserts to the coast to the cities. And then they had these presentations all up and down the coast also. Yeah. And I thought that theme was compelling. Like if you didn't get it in the beginning, you certainly started to pick up, at least I picked up on it. So I was kind of drawn into it, like, oh, where are they going to do this from?
I think they did do a good job because I have a tendency to be frustrated with California. And watching the video, I was like, it's a pretty cool state. Like it's got a lot going for it.
Designed in California.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Next question.
Did it feel like the video clips were longer? The animation clips?
I didn't feel like they were that much longer, but maybe they were. You mean just the explanation clips of things blowing, opening up and?
Well, there was like an Iron Man kind of animation clip, and then there was the Apple Watch animation. Yeah, that was an explanation, but those things kind of adds excitement, and really, it's not somebody standing there talking in front of a green screen, and that kind of adds more excitement.
Well,
too.
What I will say is that Apple is very good at filling up. there's a handful of places that I saw in the keynote that I was like, they really should have an animation here. Like they should have, like, I look at everything like, let's cover that up with some kind of something happening. Like there's something that can underline it. But for the most part, Apple does it better than almost everybody else. You know, that where because most people don't put that stuff in because it's too expensive, you know, and so Apple doesn't have that problem. You know, they just go, well, it'd be really great if we had something happening here that would explain how this works.
Next thing you know, a company's been hired to make that animation for them.
Sorry?
I said, and the next thing you know, a whole nother company has been brought in to fill that 5 seconds with a great animation.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Marty in Maryland, I find it interesting that a computer manufacturer has such a high production value and effects in their videos. Are they hiring established film and video directors, DPs, and crew, or are they doing these themselves?
Go ahead, Chris.
Cost is no object. They can do whatever. They can do whatever they want. They can hire anybody they want.
And they do. Yeah. So I mean, with anything like this, any production like this, there's going to be a core staff that's doing planning and doing maybe some of the shooting and putting together some of the small pieces of it. But generally, it is a large outsourced crew that is coming up from LA or some in San Francisco. For their own commercials, I think they actually shoot. I think they've said that they shoot a lot of those commercials themselves at this point. It's mostly around privacy. They have their own studios and so on and so forth. But for these big keynotes, it's all external. Like, it's not all external. There's definitely a core crack team that's really good at that. But it's and that's the way it is for everybody. You know.
What about the creatives? I mean, the creatives have to be happening like continuously for the next, you know. They're creatively planning something that's going to happen 2 years down the road.
That a lot, I think, is happening internally. Like the planning of it and the storyboards and the things like that, I think a lot of them are happening. But when it comes to the execution, they're just bringing in, you know, what they need to do that. And one of the reasons that a corporation you want to do it that way is you want to customize who's showing up. For this shot, there's someone who's really good at that thing, and you want to hire that person, and you don't want them to be corporate. Because if they're in the corporation, they're not. When you are a freelancer, you're doing something different every week. You're interacting with other teams. You're learning. You're getting better, and you're or a small company. You don't have to be a freelancer, but you're absorbing all this new ideas and new things that you don't get when you work in a corporate environment. Like you just don't. You know what the rest of your team does, and if you're lucky, you interact with some folks. But a lot of times, especially at a secretive company, you don't interact on forums. You don't interact on, you don't have any way to get more information other than. But the cool thing is, if you're big enough, all the vendors will come to you and talk to you about it. They'll bring stuff in and let you see it. But it's really hard to keep it's inside of a corporate environment. It's really hard to stay current, and so
which is why I love office hours.
No, absolutely.
We're always staying current on new technology.
Well, no, absolutely. But you don't see you don't see a lot of Apple employees hanging out in office hours talking with us,
isn't that odd?
or asking questions. But you can't because you can't do that because you get yourself in trouble. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that I could tell you that camera operators that we hire are usually in the probably $7,000 to $1,000 a day people for most of the stuff that we do. When I was cutting for Apple, they were using an Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker. His rate was $5,000 a day.
Right. Yeah.
And his stuff looked great.
Turns out
it was such a joy to cut his stuff because there was so much coverage and so well thought out, and he had a high rate and he brought his own people, and he also didn't allow a producer to say, "Oh, I don't think we need that piece of hardware. Can you take that on the invoice?" He goes, "No, I'm bringing the whole truck. I'm bringing everything, and I'll use what I feel is right." And it was a joy to cut his stuff.
Well, and the thing is there's some companies. I have some friends that work for, it's not Apple. It's a different companies that really play. They first started with, everyone starts being scrappy. Like, how do we do this for a little less, and how do we do other thing? And then the companies that understand content and they want the best talent and they want the best whatever, they say, what do you need? And they just, how do we make this work? Because they understand the multipliers of what they're doing. and they're not looking through your itemized list and saying, can we take this thing out? Can we take that thing out? That's what the newbies do. like the newbie corporate, they do this thing where they sit there and they nitpick all your little weird things because they feel like you're spending too much money somewhere else. Because what happens is that you're only there long enough to not work with them anymore as a talent, And so the thing is that the ones that are really producing real content, go, okay, what is this going to cost? And they have to trust you, and then you come back and you say, this is what you want is going to cost, and then they say, okay, let's do it. Do you have what you need? And then you go, and then you start to, and then you start. But what happens is then you're thinking as a creative, you're thinking about the next 3 jobs for that company. Like you're doing tests and you're figuring stuff out, and you're trying to figure, okay, we could do this great thing, and you're thinking when they're nitpicking, you're thinking about how do I find other clients. like that's as a creative, and that's the reality of it. And so when you work for a big company that just says a company that understands content is a company that finds people that they trust and then gives them the budget that they need. And I've worked with some folks that will sit there and they get to use Angenieux lenses, and they get to use these big cameras, and they get to do it for a corporate environment, and they love it. And they love working for that company, and like, for instance, my brother, when he started doing tons of Salesforce stuff and Salesforce got into that mode of like, hey, we'll just pay what you need and get you what you need and everything else. He just dumped me all the time. That's my own brother. Like it was like, I was like, I couldn't afford him because he was making too much money, and he gets to play with lots of toys and travel around the world. He was not interested in me anymore. So, and I was like, I brought you into this, anyway, go ahead, Mitchell, real quick. We're going to have to move.
The rest of the world, it's changed. Just to amplify, you were just saying, it's the gatekeepers are disappearing and the bean counters are making a decision.
It's not though, it's always been that way. But the thing is the bean counters in different companies have different levels of power. And, and what happens though is that there are creative directors that come in and they say, we really want great content. And then they just run everybody over, and that you hire, and you're paying them a lot of money, and they come into one of these companies and then they have leverage, and then they just go, and suddenly all the production starts to look really good and not weird and janky the way nitpicked events look weird and janky. Anyway, next question.
Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas. How would Apple aggregate viewer statistics across multiple platforms? Or what other measures of success would be used in the absence of audience interaction data?
Akamai Analytics. If you open up the developer view in Chrome, and I'm sorry, when I watch people's streams, I watch their developer page. So the developer view. So I actually looked at the HTML. So if you go down the HTML in most of these, you'll see an Akamai Analytics cookie. Or some kind of feed there that it's keeping track of like who's watching and so on and so forth. Go ahead, John, real quick.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's sales. It's bottom line sales. Their sales increased. Their sales have been amazing in the last 10 years.
Yeah, you can measure the success by the market cap.
Yeah, but you can also, but it is, they do, I mean, all companies definitely pay attention to how many people viewed, how long was the dwell time, how long, there's a bunch of stats that they're looking at across those things as well. We break those down for our clients all the time. Like, this is how many people came in, this is when they came in, because you can time it. You can say, we did a Twitter output 2 minutes in. If we see a surge in viewers, okay, we got that from, and where did it come from, and all the other things. And knowing what those are allows you to just tells you what's effective and what isn't. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned the camera, most likely Arri Alexa LF, probably were rented. Would the rental house provide technicians on site, or would they just drop the equipment off?
Go ahead, Chris.
For Apple, they'll do anything they want. They'll show up in a limo, and they'll do what it takes.
So typically the way most of these productions work, especially when you start getting into the Arri world, is that you're going to have a build day in the rental house. So you're going to go to the rental house. They're going to have all the stuff there. They've already done most of the work for you. Your possibly your DP, but mostly your second AC and AC will they'll go in and they'll build up the camera and make sure that it's all what it needs to be before in the rental house. Oh, I need this one more thing, or I need this thing, and I need this put in the air. And they build it up, and then they either keep it the way it is, or they break it back down again. But they get it all working in the rental house, and there's a whole day that you do that, and sometimes days, sometimes weeks that they do that for a big production, and then they take it to on site to do it, because it's just too many little moving parts to try to, like, oh, I forgot this one thing or whatever. The easiest place to set it up. And that's what we did when we had a warehouse full of this gear, is we would build it all up the day before, the weeks before. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. What was the verdict on whether the screens and the shots were LED or comped in?
John.
So the screens really reminded me of the stuff that they use on Weather Channel, which is VizRT. They look just too perfect. I think they're using something similar.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think they're comped in, but they're comped in super well. I only saw one shot in particular where it was the woman that was presenting from the ferry building, inside the ferry building,
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what they led us to believe with the drone shot prior. And there was a part in her hair where I think the key could have been better. I mean, I couldn't have made it better, but I'm pretty sure it was comped in. And that's because they can change their mind and they can polish and they can tweak it, and they don't have to marry themselves to a graphic look until the very last minute.
I am unsure now. I was certain
Really?
that they were comping them in, and I've gotten to a point where I'm not sure if they're comped in or not, because they're doing enough complex moves that it's just like one of those things, like it really gets tweaky when
I
you
was going
start
to ask
doing
if
lots
you
of,
ever saw it drifting.
yeah, they're doing lots of little moves now in front of it, and they're walking in a weird way, and there's stuff behind them, and I don't notice a lot of problems. There's been a couple places, to your point, but I have to go back and look at it frame by frame. But I've been like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they might be actually just doing those on screens. But whatever they're doing, it's either extremely well done composites or physical. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. What insights into the production, like location descriptions, were provided by reading the closed captions?
I don't know. I know Laura said that they were telling us where they were coming in from inside of the audio descriptions. They didn't tell us that. We could have used some lower thirds there. That's all I'm saying. I think it would have been nice to show where they're all coming from, but I guess they made us guess. But that was the little Easter egg.
It was interesting that I think I would have been tempted to put in just a little locator graphic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the orchestra shell in Coronado or whatever, San Diego.
Yeah. Next question.
Kenneth Jones, Seattle. I missed the end of the presentation. Was there a one more thing that was worth noting?
Nope. They just did their thing. They got to the end, and then they left. I was actually afraid when we got to the end of the hour, like, oh no, there's not gonna be a pro version. I was like, and then they just went, I think they timed that really well. Like,
Tim has never done a one more thing, has he?
Yeah, I don't think he has. I think that that was kind of I think that was a Steve thing, and then they stopped doing it when Steve wasn't doing it.
Do you think he won't do it because it's a Steve thing, or they just haven't had occasion?
I think if they have a big enough product release, they would do a one more thing. But they're not going to do it unless they're like, so I think if they actually are making glasses, the glasses, if they're making the car, like that kind of thing would be a kind of a, the question, and it would only be if they could keep it secret,
Apple
long enough.
Pencil, now in pink.
No, the
One more
glasses,
thing.
Apple glasses.
We're moving to Apple Pen. it's digital, but it's permanent. All right. Next question.
Alex Carmichael. Alex, you talked about Apple's post-COVID return to in-person events. With the quality of production of these events, why not add a Mukana-like platform for remote interaction?
I think it makes more sense for Apple to do that on a day-to-day basis with developers than it has to do with their customers. Their customer size is too big. Now I think that there are lots of places that you could do it. You could do verticals, like, for instance, with the developers. Like if I was doing this, I would have a developer session every day with a Mukana kind of thing, where one day it's the QuickTime team, the next day it's the AR team, the next day it's the Maps team, and developers who are interested in that thing get to come and have, ask their questions and be part of the conversation. I think it makes sense for people who are a keynote every week, a session about Keynote every week, where people just come up and ask questions. How do I do this? Or how would you display this? Or what would you do there? For teachers, like how to use the Apple product. So I think that Apple could do these verticals. For a keynote, it doesn't make any sense, I don't think, for them to do that. I think they have to broadcast it. And they're one of the few companies that do. Last question, I think.
Tim O'Gallagher of Austin, Texas. Improvements over 2020?
Yeah, it's head and shoulders over 2020. I mean, I think that it is. I think it's 10 times better than the first one. You know, like they went, first one was good, but they just keep adding. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. If Apple leads the way in keynotes like this, who's the hottest on their heels?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I don't know that Apple necessarily leads. Frame killed it last time they did a keynote.
I think Frame killed it. I think this keynote was the new standard as far as production goes than Frame. Yeah.
Are you going to be the one to tell Emery that?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Emery would tell me, well, we spent 1/10 what Apple's or 1/20th of what Apple spent to do the same thing. So,
yeah.
So, but I do think that those are the two that we've seen that are the most interesting so far. Next question.
Jamie Fryer, Silver Springs. Given the lead time, do you think the California streaming theme was set before the date of the recall election was announced?
I don't think Apple was paying attention to that. I don't think they cared. Yeah, I just don't think they cared. They don't care about that kind of thing. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, there are clear masks available that would still provide some level of filtration. References the URL. Wouldn't you want the ASL interpreter to be wearing such a mask?
I don't think so. The ASL interpreters in a room by themselves, so they don't. I mean, if they were in a room with everybody, we might have that problem. But if we're broadcasting, there's plenty of social space. There's plenty of other things. I don't think they need a mask. So.
I do like the way at the end how they have their little disclaimer slides, like we've done all these things and we were careful and blah blah blah. It's classy the way they did it.
So we hope to do more of these. I think that I'm a little afraid of putting up Apple's specifically, like showing frames. We may do some of that in after hours or a session or something like that, just because I know YouTube will take it down. One thing Apple's pretty aggressive about is putting their content back up on YouTube. So, I don't want to get a strike. That's what I'm mostly worried about. So, we'll talk about it more in after hours somewhere next week or something like that, where we just kind of dig through it in Zoom. But keep your eye on keynotes that we think we would want to cover. I would love to have more of these where we watch them. And even if there are things that are just tangential, especially in after hours, just we'll watch them. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about the production of it. We'll talk about maybe the content of it. But let's keep doing these because I think we want to keep learning, from all of these things. So I think it's a useful thing. Thanks to our producers for keeping the fires warm. lots of good, great questions. Like you're driving the conversation. You did a great job. And thanks to our slightly small but very effective ninjas of a panel that kept this thing rolling here. So anyway, thanks to our fine panelists.